Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, I've got the privilege of talking to Marsha Clarke again. You may remember Marsha from, I think it was less than a year ago, but it was a great episode. Marsha is from the BFRO, and she shared some incredible things that had happened on expeditions. And I remember saying, Marsha, if anything else cool happens in the future, reach out. And Marsha reached out quicker than I thought, but there's been some really interesting things that have happened in just the last half a year or less than a year on BFRO expeditions. Marsha's going to share all about it. But Marsha, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show again.
Thank you, Jeremiah. As I said, we come across some interesting events, things that I think would capture people's or the public's interest. We want to share that. We want to get that out there. Real quick, just so listeners can catch up, a little background. I'm retired from the United States Marine Corps, retired Exxon Mobil field geologist, and now I spend full-time doing research and investigations on the field. This year, I've done 8 expeditions with the public and 4 private, where I personally will take a group of 4 to 6 people out just researching to see if it's a potential viable expedition site for BFRO in the future. Real quick, I got into this a long time ago, 1984. I was a young Lance Corporal in the Marine Corps, and we went to Bridgeport Marine Corps Cold Weather Training facility up in the Sierra Mountains in California. And came my turn to stay in guard duty. In Marine Corps, we call it night fire watch. And the sergeant of guards sets me out to stay in my post. And I'm standing on a wood pallet, about 4 inches of snow on the ground. And after about 20, 30 minutes, just something made me turn around and look over to my right. And at about 35 feet away, out from behind this very large tree, stepped out an adult male Bigfoot. We locked eyes for a good 6-7 Mississippis. M16 in my hand. I kept telling myself that looks human, but it's naked with a lot of fur. And I couldn't flick the selector switch on my M16. I couldn't think to do that. And as quick as it came, it stepped behind the tree and was gone. That started a quest that had always been in the back of my mind for a long time. I went throughout my career in the Marine Corps always knowing that there was something there. And later on, went to school, got my master's degree, was out in the field doing mapping, and I would have these encounters like in Montana and Northern California and Idaho that by today's standard, we'd call them B and C encounters. Something sleeping next to my tent, something jostling all the pots and pans, something on 2 feet walking by me. I just really didn't make the connection until I started participating in the community blue pages for BFRO. That would have been 2009 and 10. And I started to get a feel for, wow, what had I been experiencing all this time? So I would go out my own, and because at first I was a little hesitant, and I'd go out my own and I'd look around, poke around, and got involved with some friends that were with the Rocky Mountain Sasquatch organization, and then later moved to the East Coast and physically became involved with the BFRO. It was on initial BFRO expeditions where I'd had some very unique encounters. I had a Class A with them as well. At first, I was touched through my tent. And that's convinced me that this is something real, it's physical. And I have to have the answer to this. I have to resolve within me what is the truth. And so that's what I've been following ever since then. If you recall, our last discussion, I was sharing an episode of in the mountains in Tennessee, being alone in a very large wilderness area. The ranger's gone, the host gone, and having a Squatch or multiple ones in my campsite. They would trip an alarm, they'd break it off, they'd put the pin back in it, and they basically manipulated the whole situation. They had that level of intellect. They knew how to draw me out of my camp. They knew what I was listening for. They knew a snap of a branch would pull me out. So it just fuel for the fire for me. Lately, though, I've had others come to me and they talk about the paranormal, or they talk about the woo faction. I really didn't put too much to that. I'm a hard-nosed scientist, trained meteorologist and geologist, and I got to have something reproducible in the laboratory. I need the hard data. I've started recording EMF and EMR along with infrasound. I have my own portable sound spectrum analyzer. I can go out, and if I hear a sound, I can look visually on a meter and tell you what hertz it is. And if it's something that's in that low range, I can record it, etc. And so there's been a few occasions where I've heard or I've been able to record infrasound, no physical effect to anyone in the group. And then within just a few moments, a tree knock or heavy footsteps, rock throwing. So it was like a precursor or an indicator that there was something in the area. That hasn't been true all the time, but on 4 of 8 occasions, it has proven accurate. So I'm still trying to refine that.
That is amazing, Marsha. So you're saying pretty much oh my goodness, I'm trying to wrap my mind around that. Is this just a product that people can buy off the shelves, or did you put this together yourself?
No, it's something I put together for myself. I have a couple friends that are electrical engineers. I'm a licensed geotechnical engineer, but I have a couple friends that are electrical engineers, and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to visually see on a screen a sound that's transmitted from anywhere from 0 to 20,000 hertz. And I want to be able to measure it. I want to be able to record it. And okay, no problem. So basically just a DC powered or battery powered spectrum analyzer is what it came to. It fits in a small backpack. I also have a signal generator where I can create a tone if I want to in infrasound. And like I shared previously, I don't recommend that to anyone. The first time and only time I've done that, I was bluff charged. And so until I get a better handle on that, I recommend others not doing that. But yeah, it fits in a backpack. I can carry it with me, set it down. It's got a rechargeable battery bank to it, and I can watch the screen, and I can see, for example, if an aircraft is going by or if people are talking, or if there's some silent electronic signal, say within a utility line that they use for leak detection. I can tell what hertz that is and say, okay, it's 4020. That's a utility line. That's the alarm system in underground utility. Or if I see something at 10,000, or anything along those lines. But it's become a very useful tool. I haven't perfected any of this yet. I've been working on this now for about a year, but there has been limited success. I'm beginning to see that that after I did some interviews with some large mammal scientists at the local zoo here, about those PhD people educating me on the use of infrasound and how animals communicate, etc. And then speaking to two ENT, ear, nose, throat doctors at the VA hospital and one at the University of South Carolina Medical about how the inner ear works, and specifically when it hits a certain wavelength of sound to it. And so understanding that it's probably not juveniles that use infrasound, and it's not all adults who can do it in the Sasquatch community. They have to have a certain length vocal cord, a certain size voice box. They have to have a certain lung capacity. And it could even depend upon the atmospheric pressure and humidity as well. And then with a human, being able to hear it or be able to respond to it, even if it's just physically, they have to have a certain tolerance within their eardrum to a particular frequency. Not all humans will react to it. Some of them, it's just a reaction that they'll never sense. With some people, they're hypersensitive to it. And if a sound comes towards them that's 8.5, 10 hertz, 11.5, all of a sudden, they will feel it. They will feel it physically. And some people, they won't. So it all depends. Each human is distinctly individual, and each Sasquatch is distinctly individualized. But however, it's probably adults that are capable of doing that. At least so far, that's what's been shared with me with large mammals, with those interviewing those two PhD folks, that it's the adults that use that. It's not small, young ones, juveniles. It's only the adults, and it's not all adults. You'll have one tiger who can do it or one whale that can do it, but maybe others won't. And so I've just been applying that data and trying it out in the field. Like I said, out of 8 situations where I've had the meter set up perfect, where the weather was perfect, people around me to witness it, 50% of the time, 4 out of 8 of those times, I was able to detect infrasound before the Squatch made itself physically known to us, which leads me into seeing that perhaps they're using it more often than what we are aware of. They could be using it as a form of communication between themselves. Or, for example, the older dominant male of a clan or pod could be calling the kids, "Hey, Mom, it's time for dinner," or whatever. I mean that jokingly, but this could be their way of communicating with the parts of the clan. Don't know. It needs a lot more work, a lot more data, but it seems to be a pretty positive direction with that.
I feel like this could, it either is or it will lead to like how I feel like we've been wanting a big breakthrough. And this is the way to actually know if there's an adult Sasquatch in the area. Now, it can't, juveniles, it sounds like, probably don't use infrasound, but if there's an adult Sasquatch, you can know it's actually there. That's amazing.
Exactly. Again, it's not proven. It's just 4 out of 8 times when I've been able to set up the equipment and had optimum conditions, it's proven successful 50% of the time so far. I just keep at it. I keep working at it, and there could be a paper down the road for me to submit. But right now, that's where it seems to be leading me. Have also detected, since our last discussion, we had some unique experiences, and they also involved infrasound and how it was deployed on an expedition in Ohio. The expeditions, I should back up and say that the expeditions I participate in are generally south of the Pennsylvania border and on both sides of the Appalachian Mountains all the way to Georgia. And I pretty much consider that my study area. And did a latest expedition in Ohio, one of our very popular ones. We get a lot of results out there, a lot of interaction. If that's something you ever decide someone would want to do, as soon as you see those things notified to the public, get your paperwork in, because it fills quite rapidly. Anyhow, taking out a group of people on night ops, and myself and another investigator came up with a strategy we wanted to try. You got to remember, the BFRO has a dual mission. One is public awareness, but the other one is collecting data. And so we came up with a plan where we know we've had interaction in the past multiple times. And we purposely set a group right there, made a small base camp, and my other field partner, investigator, she would circle out at about a half mile, and she would call blast different previously recorded suspected Sasquatch sounds. And we did that for a couple hours, and then we put everything quiet. Lo and behold, about a half hour later, this is about midnight, we made sure we were cold, no fire, small little base camp right there. I had 10 people with me, a very large group, but that was planned. And so we started hearing footsteps at about 30, 35 yards on a small knoll that was about 40 by 50 yards in size. And at the top, the knoll was no more than 8 to 9 feet tall. So I had this little mound covered with dense trees, and all of a sudden we could hear bipedal footprints in and out of the ground clutter. Okay, this is getting favorable. So I deployed 2 people out to the east, about 100 yards, had them set their chairs up and have white headlamps, but not turn them on. And so these footsteps still continued back and forth. We heard some grunts, some heavy breathing. Okay, this is really favorable. So real quick, I deployed 6 people to my west. And they slowly circled out behind this knoll. I think you see where I'm going with this. Setting up, any Marine would recognize it. We're setting up an ambush. And set out people, space themselves apart. And the hominid was still pacing back and forth. Now it was getting more excited. The grunts are coming more often. We can hear hissing. It sounded like a beating his fist against a tree. All of a sudden, we spot it on 2 different FLIRs. Got great FLIR video of it. And we got audio recorders going. And this hominid now is starting to panic. We can hear it running back and forth. It's hissing, it's growling, and we have it totally surrounded in an area a little bit smaller than half a football field. At that time, once we had it surrounded, the 2 people that were out to my right that were sitting in the chairs, I told them, turn on your white headlamps and start walking towards the middle of the knoll. We're going to flush this thing out. So we executed the encirclement, and we were going to flush it out. And just as they started walking in with white headlamps, the guy standing next to me operating the FLIR starts saying, Marsha, I hear something saying, hey, 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 hey. I go, what do you mean? I just hear it. Do you hear it? I said, no. The hair went up in the back of my neck, on my arms, and something told me that this wasn't right. I called everyone in. I said, everyone form up a circle, let this squatch pass. It was probably 6 feet, not quite 6.5 when we went back to measure in the daylight the next morning. We let it pass. So it ran. In retrospect, we learned that was probably not a smart thing to do, to encircle and entrap a young Sasquatch. I hope none of the listeners out there attempt to do that. So this was a Saturday night. We got everyone back to our little temporary base camp, and we're all congratulating each other. We all reviewing the FLIR footage. We could see the conical shape of the head. We could see the fur. Great images in the FLIR. And so, but the forest was just dead quiet. Not a cricket, not a frog, not a bird, nothing. So we stayed for about another half hour. And it got late, and so okay, let's go back to base camp. Everyone has to pack out in the morning because 9 o'clock is when the expedition is officially over. So we go back to base camp, and the general rule of thumb is at that particular expedition where we set up at, we have consistent interactions at night between 2 and 6 in the morning with young juveniles there. 2, 3, 4 of them. They typically run through camp. They jostle ice chests. They'll stand by your tent and push on the sides. It's pretty common. Pretty innocuous, nothing harmful, nothing aggressive, but it's teenagers exploring. And so we learned to expect that's going to happen. But that particular night, nothing occurred. Completely dead quiet, not an owl, not a frog the entire night. Myself and 4 other investigators, we typically will rent the group camp area for another day or 2 beyond the expedition because we want to see what happens after the main group leaves. We want to see what transpires. So we help people get packed and leave, and we do a cleanup, and we want it to look nice. We don't want rangers to think that we're leaving a mess behind. And so we do that. We go get lunch, come back. Now it's about 6 o'clock. And we run over real quick where we had the encounter the night before. We take some quick measurements, do a reenactment. We place someone next to this one tree that there's a definite branch, and we got a measurement, and etc. So we get back. Now it's about 6:45, and we're talking about maybe ordering food later and finding a convenient spot to go pick it up. There's 5 of us, and one of the people in our group, she decides to walk back towards her tent, walk past the pit toilets, about a good 100, 110 yards away, just slightly around the corner. Now, it's still daylight out, and she comes walking back, and she hears something paralleling her in the tree line. This is really uncommon behavior there. We never have action during the day, especially near base camp. But she walks up, she visits the pit toilet, and she's doing her business, and she can hear something behind the facility. It's actually touching the wood of the pit toilet. And she finishes her business, and she comes out, she looks over her left shoulder. There's a large male black fur squatch, taller than the pit toilet building, wider, standing there. She sees him, and he immediately goes to all 4s. We suspect he's going to pounce. She goes running and screaming up the hill towards the rest of us, screaming what she just saw. 3 of us, we go walking down towards that pit toilet. We want to see what the heck scared her. And so we can hear something moving in the tree line. It's heavy. The forest there is dense. And we can hear it. It sounds, this wheezing sound, like a cross between a wheezing and a donkey braying, so to speak. But it's heavy. We don't see anything. We go back up to this little plateau area where some of us are camped, and we made the decision that this behavior was very aggressive. To have an adult come out during the day to stalk and potentially pounce on someone, that wasn't behavior that was common. So we decided to put our teardrop trailers and tents and whatnot in a circle on this little plateau area and wait the night out and see what would happen. So we did. As it got dark, we would hear thumps in the forest. It would sound like someone was taking a large excavator and slamming a bucket into the ground, and you would hear and feel this loud boom. And it would happen on multiple sides. We would hear an owl, the oddest, weirdest owl calls you could imagine, along with tree knocks all around us all night. One of the investigators, she didn't live too far from there. She had to be to work at 9 in the morning, on Monday morning. So we had to get her out of there by 5. So we adopted the plan that no one goes anywhere by themselves. Because the BFRO expedition was over with, we all armed up, obviously. And so we didn't let anyone be by themselves. And so we all woke up about 5 in the morning. We got this other investigator packed up, her tent folded up, got her in her car, and another investigator followed her out. So they left, etc. They didn't encounter anything on the drive out. And so the rest of us, it's still, dark out. We're going to go back to sleep. So I'm the only one in the tent. The others are in these small teardrop trailers. And it's about hour later, maybe 50 minutes later, and the moon is quite bright. I can see anything that would cast a shadow back in my tent. It would come up really bright. And lo and behold, I hear something very heavy out to the right, and I see a shadow pass by the back of my tent. Now, that back of my tent, I sleep in an 8-foot by 16-foot tent that's 7'4" in the center. And I did it so that the edge would be right at the lip of the downgrade. There's a minor road behind my tent that's 2.5 feet down. So whatever walked back behind my tent, casting a shadow that went over my tent, you figure there's almost 10 foot of elevation change. It casts a shadow. I waited a little bit longer. I clicked on my radio. Hey guys, I've got shadows behind my tent. And they open their doors and they're looking out. They're trying to see if they can film something. There's nothing there. Okay, they go back in their trailers. Half hour later, same shadow returns, and I see a hand pushing against the long side of the back of the tent, and they're walking as they run their hand across the full length of my tent. At that point, I'm on the radio. Guys, it's right here. It's pushing through my tent. You got to see something. One of them that was covering the other side of my tent, at least visually, he was totally asleep. And we found footprints. We heard it going through the brush. But these are obvious signs of very aggressive behavior. And so as soon as it got daylight, even though we had that group campsite rented for another night, we thought the better part of valor was to leave. In hindsight, in further discussions, this may have been a retaliation by the parental or one of the dad or mom or whatever of the juvenile that we had encountered and entrapped for a brief period of time that Saturday night. It very strongly possibility that's what this was. This was a retaliatory act of intimidation, and it was specified against those of us that were there Saturday night. A few observations from that. They recognized who we were. They were able to distinguish us from other humans, and it acted in a very forceful manner. No juveniles, all adults. And so that was a pretty good learning experience.
I would agree with you that I'd almost put money on it. That was a retaliatory move based on how you guys really didn't have anything bad by it. You had that juvenile surrounded. That's an incredible weekend. How big were the footprints that you guys saw approximately?
Okay, the footprint for the juvenile or for the adult?
For the adult, I guess we do both, but I'm curious more about the adult.
Okay, for the adult, in behind the pit toilets, there was two of them where it had a pitched roof. The back end of the pitched roof was 8.5 feet, where the front part of the pitched roof was almost 10. It was 9 foot 10 inches. And the investigator came out of the pit toilet, looked over her left shoulder, and the top of the head was higher than the pit toilet. In that specific area, even though the leaves were wet and dry leaves and wet leaves on top of a hard surface, however, you could see where it had been disturbed, and they would have been anywhere between 16 and 18 inches in length. And where it ducked down into the tree line and further down the slope, there were actual slide marks that were probably 2 or 3 feet long going down the slope. Now for the juvenile, where we were looking at the trees where the FLIR showed their head equal with a particular branch or whatever, we did find one footprint, and it was 10.5 inches long.
It's extremely interesting. Okay, so yeah, the 16, that's about the size that we found out in Oregon this summer. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Did you Were you able to use the spectral analyzer tool
Yes,
at all
we
during
were.
that weekend?
And
Yeah.
just by coincidence, when that investigator came running up away from the pit toilet, you can tell she was obviously in shock. There was a group of us sitting in a small circle, and I had all my equipment spread out, set up, and when myself and two other investigators started walking towards her, the other person sitting there said all the equipment white line or red lined, and some of them the screens went totally white, just off the scale. Now, on the spectrum analyzer, we recorded two infrasound traces, one at 8.5 hertz and the other at 11 hertz, and they alternated. So something would sound or broadcast at 8.5, and then there would be a response at 11. 8.5, and a response at 11. And that continued throughout most of the night, where it's my assumption that two of them were communicating at two different wavelengths back and forth between us. Now, we did have one of the investigators feel slight vertigo, upset stomach, a little bit of nausea. That could have been a slight zapping effect, probably hypersensitive to one of those frequency ranges. But it was rather obvious in the trace that I recorded that there were two distinct sources of infrasound that were alternating back and forth, one from the north and one from the southwest. And so that was really unique to have had that, because I have had recordings where I'm sitting on night ops and having the person sitting to my right about a foot away, and we're fleering a squatch at about 30 yards. And that squatch zapped the guy sitting next to me to my right. I felt nothing. And I have all my meters out, and I'm being able to detect that EMF was at about 70 microtesla. EMR, we were talking between 0.8 and 0.9 microsieverts. And you're seeing, 10.25 hertz. And you're seeing all this happen, and the guy next to me, he's vomiting, his eyes are dilated, he can't even sit straight in a chair, he's falling to the ground because he's been zapped so hard. But it didn't affect anyone. So that data I thought was extremely important in helping me narrow what the heck's going on.
It's so fascinating. It's like you could almost, if you keep getting all this data, you could almost make a data bank or data set of what type of infrasound is used in certain situations.
Exactly. Or if anything, imagine having a little detector on the side of your backpack that when it flashes red, it senses infrasound. Perhaps there's a squatch near you within 75 to 100 yards. Even though the range whales can communicate over miles. But right now, I'm just working with terrestrial level hominids. I don't want to try to deal with a whale. But yeah, it's an ongoing project I'm working on. There are other things that, for example, we came back to that area, myself and those same investigators, because we wanted to duplicate in a controlled setting what we were seeing, because you got to remember the scientific method, you'd be able to reproduce the same effects. And so we went back. First night, a little bit of juvenile action. The second night, no juveniles. All of a sudden, it's like the adults recognize who's there. And now the interaction, I can't explain some of it. We have our tents and trailers set up that each person can watch another. So I can see the people down below me, the people behind me can see me, and we all have radios on. We intentionally go to bed at like midnight and we stay awake, and all of a sudden, our radios stop working. The screens just start flashing. Even though they're fully charged, they start flashing. My equipment, my EMR data, my EMF, those meters died. Others observing my tent saw small white orbs buzzing my tent for a good 2 or 3 minutes. And it looked like someone was walking in the forest with a flashlight, and then it would go away. An hour later, it would come back. We've had, in that same situation, a guy's windows to his truck that are electronic go up and down by themselves. As if we were hit with a small EMP type effect. All the electronics went out. Cell phones had to be reset, powered down, powered back on. Radios would not work. And this is for a period of about 40, 45 minutes. So here we have no juveniles, same area, big, tall, black male, black fur males. And all of a sudden now we're having this EMP style attack on our electronics. And they're thumping. They sound like a really bad imitation of an owl. We unzip a tent and the owl starts hooting repeatedly. You go back in your tent, rezip your tent, the hooting stops. And the other thing that was quite odd is at 4:30 in the morning, while all this is taking place, a helicopter goes by real slow at about 400 feet AGL and goes slowly over our camp. It goes on continuously. And all of a sudden, all that electronic stuff stopped. Everything came back on. Everything worked perfect. I get home and I find that the key bob from my car, the batteries in both the key bobs are dead. The key bob from a home alarm system on the keychain is dead. I got to get all of them replaced. This research, it requires a lot more work, but that's just an example of some things that happen on expeditions that I just simply cannot explain and requires more research. And it happens on a regular basis.
That's absolutely, and that's all on just the one Ohio expedition during this last year.
Yes, it is. Now, further, the other thing that had occurred, I had never personally experienced before in Tennessee on an expedition. And I'd done a presentation there and the do's and don'ts of what not to do during night ops. Trying to share what had happened in Ohio. Don't do that. And so we go out, we're in smaller groups, 4 or 5 instead of 10. And we're sitting in a real good hot spot next to a creek. And I'd send out a team of 2 people out to my right. They'd go down about 100 yards, take a left and go to the creek. They would do tree knocks or they'd do rock clacking. And we'd get a response pretty quick. We would hear footsteps in the forest, we'd get a responding tree knock, etc. At one point, I brought everyone back. We're sitting around in a circle, good moon out, so it's dark, but we could see. And about 8 to 10 feet behind the guy directly sitting in front of me, I see over his head in the tree line, what looks like rhododendrons or whatever, eye shine. That close. And I'm telling the guy, you know what? I got eye shine behind you. And he's saying, what should I do? And I go, get up very slowly and just walk towards me. And all of a sudden we get a garbage smell, the wet dog, and boom, the eye shine's gone. Okay, so we let that rest for about 10 minutes. And okay, we're going to send out another group, this time to my left. You get out about 70, 80, 100 yards. I want you to do some rock clacks, do a tree knock, and see if we can garner in action closer to where we're seated. And they go out. Again, we get a responding tree knock. We can hear walking around in the forest behind us. So this time it sounds like we hear like a young girl giggling. Really odd. Never heard that before. And we get some vocalizations, like a little girl giggling. And then we hear what sounds like the clearing of a throat, maybe a growl. And okay, guys, come on back. So we're all sitting there. So we'll wait a little bit. Nothing else happens. Okay, so we send another group out to the right. It seems like we send out a group. They do a tree knock or rock clack, and we get a response. So this time they go out, and myself and one other person is sitting there. And over my left shoulder, I hear whispers. Like, I'm asking the person I'm with, do you hear that? And they're saying, no, I don't hear a thing. And you're sure you don't hear whispers? They go, no, and I'm hearing like that. Okay. So a moment or two later, I hear whispering again. And then all of a sudden I hear, pss, 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 Marsha. Pss, 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 pss. I hear my name called. I jumped up out of that chair and turned around. I'm looking behind trees. I'm walking into the tree line, 10, 20 feet. I'm trying to look to see what's there. And the person I'm sitting there with didn't hear a thing. So I guess that's my first experience with what's called mind speak. I cannot explain it. I don't know if I can recreate it in a laboratory, but I know what I heard. And more importantly, I know that they didn't hear it. I know I did. Shortly after that, I got everyone back. Everything stopped. The Sasquatches that were in and around us, they did one set of rock clacks and then they stopped. They laid low in place. And about a half hour later, we packed up our chairs and went back to base camp. That was rather odd. That entire expedition there in Tennessee, wonderful time. It's fully catered, great people, great presenters. They had a great Class A sighting from pretty close distance, some paranormal stuff potentially going on. I can't speak too much to that, and then I had that occurrence of rock clacks in Mindspeak. That was pretty, I'm still trying to figure that out now.
That's a whole different line that is crossed when you start to experience that. I would imagine it sounds like, tying back in with the Ohio expedition,
yeah,
that individual that heard the hey, hey, did they say if they heard it inside their head or they heard it audibly using their ears?
They thought everyone could hear it, just like what I had experienced, but no one heard it other than them. But to them, I'll just say that person's name is Tom for convenience. Tom said it sounded like, yeah, everyone could hear it. I can hear it out loud, but it was only in his head that he heard it. And there was no one. There was 3 other people other than myself, so a total of 5 people. No one heard a thing. Just the squatch going back and forth, the occasional hissing and growling, the beating on the side of a tree, which is really strange. We thought maybe we'd get some hair from that. Didn't happen. But Tom, he heard it quite clearly. And so here I am a month or so later, all of a sudden I hear something that only I can hear. So I thought that was rather unique.
That's really weird, but also very cool at the same time. A few questions I'll ask, and I pretty much all know that I know the answers, but for the sake of the listeners. So you mentioned that there was some really awesome FLIR footage or thermal footage that was captured in Ohio. Is there a place where people can view that footage?
You got to understand that each participant, including the investigators, we signed a non-disclosure agreement with the organization. All evidence, footage, etc., is property of the BFRO. Unless I had permission directly from Matt Moneymaker himself, and I'd want it in writing just to protect me and him, I can't share anything. And it wasn't on my FLIR unit. It was someone else's FLIR unit, and they would run the video again and pass it around, and you could watch it through the eyepiece. But it wasn't on my FLIR itself.
Gotcha. That includes if someone, let's say, if they were to get a photo during an expedition, if it's like dead on, not blurry, then that's under the NDA. Or if there's like video that's captured,
in theory, yes.
Yeah, if they're okay.
In theory, yes. But you know what? It's your camera. You're at home, 100, 200, 300 miles away, and you're showing it to your wife or your kids or your grandparent, whatever, and you go, see, this is what I saw. I can't attest to that, but I do know that it is my general opinion, and it's been a practice. Anything we gather out there is property of the BFRO. And I have no heartache with that. That's who's sponsoring it. That's whose name and flag we're flying under, and who puts us in that position to be able to gather that data.
Absolutely. The thing people have to, and I'm talking as someone outside the organization, because I'm not a member of it, but just from what I've heard how it works, you have to realize that there's a lot of work that goes into setting up these expeditions. Sometimes you're even on private property of people that live there, and you're able to have that access, which is pretty crazy.
You have to imagine, we have to acquire insurance, and in some instances permits, from local governing agencies, say the National Park Service or the DNR or whomever. And we have to have liability insurance. And then we have to make sure there's restrooms, there's an EMT present. And if it's catered, we're bringing in people to cook for us. Firewood is not cheap, especially when you have to have it delivered 20 miles inside a forest. And so all that costs money. Investigators do not get paid to be there. We pay a fee to be there as well. The coordinator, they typically break even or they're out of pocket a little bit on most expeditions. This is done out of love and a natural curiosity. We in the field do not make a penny from this.
It is definitely the people involved, from just talking to more than a few investigators. They definitely do love the subject. You can tell they are very much into it. It would be cool one day if we've got all the UFO, UAP disclosure, but how cool would it be if one day the BFRO was able to get all this evidence together and they were like, yeah, let's put it out there. And maybe that would be totally not what the organization would want to do, but it would be pretty cool, at least from my view anyways.
Yes, it would be. Based on what I've seen and experienced, and based on what I've talked to people whom I trust, I believe that there's probably agents within the National Park Service or National Department of Agriculture or whomever. They probably have proof positive in knowledge of this. That's my opinion. That's not the opinion of the BFRO. That's just my own personal opinion. I believe that there is government agencies or an agency that has proof positive. That's my personal opinion. In interviewing, discussing this topic with others. I can't prove it. I have no communication, no emails, no nothing. It's just my spidey sense telling me that something this obvious, this big, to go unknown, especially when you see vast tracts of forest next to military installations that are monitored from space with seismic sensors and satellite equipment that can pick up a cockroach on a log or pick up a different colored mushroom growing on a tree. They've probably spotted something.
Oh, I would say so. Absolutely.
Yeah, I believe so.
I can say 100% yes, because I've had at least 2 or 3, you could call them park rangers, that have reached out to me from places like the Smokies over the last year. However, once you come back to them and you're like, I would need you to be able to either prove some stuff or sign some stuff, they just, the communication goes dead. But it is getting to the point where I know sheriffs that are listening, I know deputies that are listening, and I think in the next few years, it's just going to get bigger and bigger. I absolutely have a feeling about that.
I agree. I believe that the quote of fate, post of the truth is out there. And just recently here in South Carolina, we have a report filed by a retired law enforcement officer, high degree of integrity, everything on private property. It's got no stick in the fire as to some form of benefit. Class A, 30, 40 feet, a good 3, 4, 5 second interchange eye to eye. And the Squatch walks off. And that's in the center of South Carolina. Now, the ongoing theory is this is probably a traveling male. Majority of the time, 85, 90% of the time, the ones that travel long distance are males, young adult males. And it's the females that don't travel too far from the family pod or clan, because they'll meet a male from a nearby clan and reproduce. And quite similar to the same pattern as you would have with baboons or gorillas. The males are the ones that end up getting pushed out, and they travel and go find another clan to join, or they find a female. But the females don't normally travel. And notice all the reports. It's not, I saw a female cross the highway with 2 juveniles behind her. It's not, we don't have a female going tree to tree with a juvenile hanging around her neck. no, it's a male that they see.
No, absolutely.
So that pretty makes sense.
I would say 99% of the accounts I get that, yes, absolutely on board with what you're saying. That definitely seems to be the case. Marsha, have you ever had something happen during an expedition where you record audio that seems to be almost, I'm trying to think of I've been talking to David Ellis about this, where it's almost like a precursor to language. I don't know.
Well, we had, like I said, that one, it sounded like a young girl chattering or high-pitched talking. We hear something where it's not quite a growl. It's not quite someone speaking the King's English, but it's something. It's a vowel-consonant combination that's unique. You wouldn't hear in the wild. And then obviously hearing mine speak, having actual words spoken. But we've had recordings. I've seen people with great audio equipment, a lot of expensive stuff, recording, and all of a sudden they're listening and they go, hey, wow, I just heard this. And in the morning they get up to run it through their laptop and the whole little SIM card is empty. I can't explain that. I don't know. I know I'm sitting there with them going, wow, what was that? But in the morning, the SIM card's empty.
There are so many things that happen in this field, the further you get into it, that it's just unexplainable, the weird stuff that happens. And you just have to keep going. And I've only done a few. You've done so many, but it's like you just have to keep going, because then you've got the biggest mystery in the world in front of you.
Exactly. I get the personal enjoyment of trying to resolve this question I have in my head, and doing it so it's credible and it's reproducible in a controlled setting or laboratory. But there's also an element to it that this is a passion of mine, as it is with other investigators. And the enjoyment we get taking people out and seeing their reaction for the first time, and they hear a stick break, then they hear footprints, and then they hear a growl, or they hear a tree knock, and you go, here, take the stick, go hit the tree. And they hit the tree, and whatever it is that did a tree knock responds to them. And seeing that look in their eyes and experiencing that with them when they see it and feel it for the first time, I enjoy that as well, being able to share this with someone for the first time.
That is very special. I agree. Any other things that come to mind about things that happened that were out of the ordinary on expeditions? I want to make sure that you share everything that you came to share.
Yeah, we've been trying out new radios. We're getting a lot of areas where there's a lot of hills and et cetera, and where radio reception is not always the best. And going out with perfectly good radios, and all of a sudden, if they don't go dead, then all of a sudden the screen flashes, and you hear sounds like a pilot talking to an air traffic control tower, and then boom, the screen flashes, and boom, it's back dead again. That's happened a few times. Now, someone suggested you were close to a portal. I don't buy that. There has been, I typically do the background research before we go out on an expedition. There's one area that we go to that seems to be a very prominent magnetic anomaly in the area that we're taking the expeditions to, and where we're experiencing orbs, different colors, different behaviors. We've experienced, gosh, for lack of better terminology, I'm going to say a dark figure. We're sitting in a field. There's a great vision. Don't need a fire. You got nice moonlight. And you're looking into a stand of trees 30, 40 feet away, pretty close. And you see something dark moving through the trees. So you pick up your FLIR and you look at it. and it's dark. It's black. You check your FLIRs, it's set on white hot or black hot or whatever. And you say, okay, it's white hot. You look up again, and it's pacing back and forth, and it's black. You mention it to other people with you, and they're picking up their FLIRs, some of them like $5,000 pulsars, and they're looking, and it's black. It's moving back and forth. It seems to hover over the ground clutter, no feet. You can see the arm swing, the head movement, the body movement, and it's black. It's the same temperature as the trees and the rocks. It's black, it's cold, but it's moving around back and forth. We get up and you know what? Anyone want to go with me? Typically, not too many people volunteer to walk with me to go confront it. So I convince two people to go with me, and we walk out towards it, and it just dematerializes instantaneously. Gone. Now, this was a small outcrop of trees between 3 farmers' fields, and on the one side is a early 19th century graveyard with about 40 headstones in it. These are all people who died from disease and whatnot back in the 1830s and 40s. I'm not saying that it's a ghost. I'm just saying that we had the movement of a figure that showed black cold on 3 separate FLIRs, 6 people watching it all at the same time, no sound, and it's moving back and forth, and it's cold. No heat signature at all. I can't explain that.
Wow, that is extremely strange.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do? We put it in the notes. A lot of people don't know this, but after every expedition, there's one overall master report filed of all the activity that took place during that expedition and at people's statements, etc. And we put it all into we have a private database that the public is not aware of. And so it goes in there, and this is what we experienced. And this is what we saw. And it's one of those things. I'm not going to claim it's one thing or another. We can just simply state, here's what we observed, here's what the instrumentation said, and we're going to put it in that file with other such occurrences and see what pops out.
Absolutely. And I just want to make sure listeners know, like, everything that you're sharing has pretty much been cleared for you to share. Like, it's not like you're just going rogue. Share. Yeah.
No, I would not do that. I thoroughly believe in the people of the BFRO. I believe in the organization. Otherwise, I wouldn't attach my name to it. I know there's soothsayers out there, and at any given time, I'm willing to discuss it with them as adults. However, believe in its people, in the mission. And I can't discuss the exact locations. I can't use people's names, etc. Again, you remember the mission of the BFRO, one is public awareness, amongst other things. And that's what we do. We want people to be aware that these living, breathing, pooping, reproducing bipedal animals are in the woods. We want people to know that. And we try to make them aware of it. And when we do expeditions, we're trying to make them aware of it from a safe distance in a safe setting. However, these are an animal. These are something that's potentially the biggest, most dangerous thing in North America. 10 feet, 1,000 pounds. You're talking bigger than a grizzly bear in some instances. And they're educated. They're high level of intellect. They can use tools. They can plan out ambushes and manipulate you. So that in itself should speak to a level of danger that is potential. And that's why we do things as a group. We do things safely in a controlled setting so that no one's off on their own and where there's a potentiality of maybe someone being ambushed. That we would not do that at all with somebody.
I think that's really cool. You have an EMT there as well. Just things I've heard over the years. You guys are going into intense situations, and it's good to have a health professional there that can address some of these things you hear come up.
We've had someone slip and break an ankle, or someone gets stung by a bee. down in Florida, someone stepped in a red ant hill, got multiple stings from red ants, all kinds of natural hazards that occur in the forests. And it's all natural. It's all something that's going to occur. However, at least there's someone there. If you get a tick on you, hey, show someone. Yeah, we have someone there. They know how to safely remove it, etc. It's not that we're offering ambulatory medical service. It's just there's someone there that's knowledgeable. They're a licensed person, and just a higher level of care and professionalism on BFRO's part.
I'm sure I'm going to bring this up because I don't want to get a ton of emails about it, because I know there's going to be a ton of emails about it because of that. Yeah. That instrument that you brought up earlier that you've pretty much come up with, that is not available to the public. That is just something that you've created yourself, and it's like very early stages.
Now imagine if you got a power supply that you're willing to walk around and carry with you. Yeah, you could probably come up with your own. That's not so super high tech that you need Elon Musk to design it for you. It's just taking technology from different fields and putting them together and using it for another application. Not every expedition has access to that type of technology. It's just the ones that I go to or participate in as a team leader. Otherwise, you're not going to have that. Likewise, there are some people I'm starting to convince them to carry EMF meters or electromagnetic radiation meters with them. And they're having some good data being observed, especially cloudless nights. All of a sudden, EMF meter goes haywire, goes off the charts. And they see a silhouette move across between cars. What's it mean? Don't know. Can I reproduce it? Maybe, but it's just curious. But at least the awareness is there that maybe we need to up our game and start collecting scientific data for meters that are reproducible.
That's really interesting. Are those meters that you can probably get for relatively cheap, or is it a little bit of investment to get those?
No, you can get a quality tri-field meter for, probably the most expensive one I've seen is about $125. But you can go on eBay or Amazon and get an EMF meter for $20, $25. You can get an EMR. You want something with a cathode tube in it. That's going to be a little bit more pricey. That's $75 to $100. Now, if you want to create your own spectrum analyzer, audio spectrum analyzer, that uses DC power that you can carry on your back. Got to create that one. It's the old Ghostbusters unregistered nuclear device backpack, but it can be done. If you have that intent, you will do it.
Is that really what it looks like when you're carrying it around, is like Ghostbusters style?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. See, with us, we go on a night ops. I'm the team lead. I have a backpack that has an expanded first aid kit. I have extra water for people. I carry the radio. I have notebooks. Then I have my instrument backpack. I have a chair, that kind of thing. So I'm all buggered down with all these backpacks with equipment and obviously safety equipment as well. You got to have that. Takes priority. Like I said, an extended first aid kit. You got extra water, radio, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I've got this big backpack of equipment with me that I'm toting along as well that weighs about 30 pounds.
That's awesome.
And then I do the same MO. Everyone sits in a circle. I will face north, and then everyone sits around me. What point of the compass you are facing? There's nothing more frustrating sitting in complete darkness. Did you hear that over there? You play a 20-question game. Where did you hear it? What did you hear? How far away was it? No, we got to use our grown-up communication skills. I heard something to the northeast about 25 yards, 4 or 5 car links or whatever, whatever method of measurement works best for you. And I heard a tree break. I heard a growl. So getting people accustomed to communicate that way. And while we're doing that, I'm taking notes. I prefer as a team lead to take the notes. And I have all these meters on the ground spread out around me. And so I'm observing those as I'm writing down all the experiences of those people around me. And I'm trying to guide them. That's okay. Believe it or not, what you're hearing is a toad or a frog croak. That's not a Sasquatch getting ready to eat you, or was that an owl or was that a Bigfoot or was that a crow, whatever. So I'm also directing that part of the night op as well. And then reacting to the opportunities that come up. You hear you hear footsteps over to the left, and all of a sudden you get a tree knock to the right, and okay, here's what we're going to do. I want someone to go do a tree knock right over there. Boom. Okay, did everyone hear that? Okay. So you get on a radio, you announce all the other teams, you've just done a tree knock, so they don't think it's a Bigfoot. And so there's a lot that's involved with leading a team out in the field. But yeah, I have that big sack of equipment that's on my back, and, and I set it. It takes me a good 15 minutes to get everything set up.
That's awesome, Marsha. Maybe someday I'll be able to check things out and go on an expedition myself. We'll see. If listeners are thinking, man, this sounds pretty cool, I might want to check this out for myself. What are ways that they can look further into maybe going on one of these expeditions themselves?
Well, one of the first things I would share with them is go to bfro.net. Check out the website. You'll see on the left-hand side, there's a list of states that show the dates for expedition in those respective states. And it gives you a description of how about submitting your paperwork and whatnot, and what your fees may be. You got to remember, they cost money to put these on. And then we have a database for you to look at reports throughout the entire United States, all broken down all the way to your county. You can see, hey, 2003, there was someone heard a howl, or 1997, someone had a Class A sighting over behind the Walmart or something. But you'll see we have a very extensive database there, and we have recordings. We have the Ohio Hall. We have the Sierra Sounds. So you can go through and look at our database, our library of information and interviews. And if going on an expedition, we're assuming you've been camping before, but that shouldn't limit you. If you haven't, share. I've never camped before, but I'd like to do this. You got a dozen people that have bent over backwards to tell you how to do it. We have a suggested list of equipment you may want to bring. Doesn't mean you have to, but we recommend it. And if it's something where if you need a four-wheel drive vehicle, is a travel trailer permitted, or is a two-wheel drive to get to it? It's been my experience in most expeditions, you don't need four-wheel drive. You can drive right to the main campsite, the base camp, with your car and set up your tent, etc. So that's not a problem. But it starts with bfro.net, and just check it out.
That's awesome. And lastly, if there's some listeners that want to try to reach out to you to talk about things you're talking about, or maybe your instrument tool that you've been putting together, anything like that, is there a way people can reach out to you, Marsha?
They're welcome to email me at marshawclarke11@yahoo.com. That's marshawclarke11@yahoo.com. Got to be polite, got to be a grown-up, got to be scientifically inclined. If it's just something to bash me, then I'll block you.
Absolutely. And we're all adults here. We think that would be common sense, but it's good to bring that up. Marsha, it's always fun to have you on the show. You always share some amazing things from the BFRO and your personal research. Thank you again for coming on the show.
You're very welcome. We're at the end of the season, time with holidays, and be picking it back up out in the forest, probably February, and going on from there. It looks like I'm on schedule for, right now, I know of 7 expeditions that I will be on, and I usually lead 3 or 4 private ones of small groups as well. And so maybe I bump into someone out in the field. Good luck to everyone. Have a safe holiday. Merry Christmas, and we'll see you out there. Whoop, whoop.
Here at Bigfoot Society, our goal is to provide a platform for those that have encountered Bigfoot to share their encounter in a safe and respected environment. But we need to hear your story. If you've experienced something that you just can't explain, please send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Then we can start the conversation. And I know a lot of you have not shared your encounter at all. It's been 20 years, and it's time that you get this off your chest, and then you can get some well-deserved rest, because I know you haven't been sleeping. I understand what you're going through, and I appreciate every one of you listening.
Bigfoot Society podcast, hosted by our captain, Jeremiah Byron, where it's all Bigfoot all the time. Have you ever had the urge to do more, to be more? Now you can by joining Bigfoot Society on the Patreon. Get ad-free episodes and even member-only episodes. Take part in movie night and even live video chats. Interact behind the scenes with Jeremiah and other Patreon members like me, Slaya. The powerful podcast goes on, and you may contribute a verse in our Patreon community. Carpe diem. Seize the day, Bigfooters, and make your lives extraordinary.
Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list.
These are all in Oregon, by the way. Oak Ridge, Dexter, Fall Creek, Deschutes National Forest area, Cultus Lake, Spirit Lake, Subtle Lake, McKenzie River area, Sweet Home area, the area west of Crater Lake, east of 230 West Diamond Lake Highway, and north of 62 Crater Lake Highway.
You can use email bigfootsociety@gmail.com. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.